Hi there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is. As always, happy whatever day it is. This is the Erickson Report. My name is Larry Erickson. I'm your host, and for the next close to half an hour, I'm going to be talking about a couple of things that I hope you will find worthy of your attention. I'm going to start by noting the fact that, I should say that if you have any reactions to the show, send them to me directly. My personal email is whoviating, WHOVIATING at AOL.com. Okay, so I start by noting that I went on vacation for a couple of weeks, and so, of course, while I'm away, the entire domestic political world explodes. I'm not even going to try to talk about impeachment news because it would probably be outdated by the time I finish this, much less by the time you see it. So instead, I'm going to make a couple of broader comments about it. And the first, I'm going to start by addressing the issue of Nancy Pelosi. Now, all through the spring into the summer and the first part of the fall, Nancy Pelosi was against impeachment. She was against impeachment. She was against it because, frankly, her primary concern, I'll call it that. Her primary concern was electing more Democrats to Congress and protecting those already there. She was afraid that impeachment as an issue would carry some risk, do some damage to the prospects of Democratic candidates in the 2020 election, particularly those regarded as vulnerable, those in maybe relatively conservative districts, and everybody's afraid that talk about impeachment and the right wing will get all hot and bothered and so on. Her opposition to impeachment certainly had nothing to do with the idea that he's not worth it, as she once said. Even less did it have to do with the idea that Tweety Pie would self-impeach, whatever the hell that was supposed to mean. It was just a political calculation regarding the 2020 elections. Now that she has embraced, apparently, impeachment, she is being praised in some quarters as if she's some great tactician who was just waiting for the exact precise right moment to strike, which frankly is nonsense. By late May, her caucus was running away from her. By late May, over half the entire House of the Representatives, which meant basically most of the Democrats, were already saying they wanted an impeachment inquiry. By the end of September, over 90% of Democrats in the House were openly saying they wanted an impeachment inquiry. Her caucus was running away from her. Major committee chairs like Adam Schiff of the Intelligence Committee, Elijah Cummings on Oversight, Jerry Nadler on Judiciary, they were having their own hearings on things that were various aspects of the whole Tweety Pie scandal world, creating what amounted to an impeachment inquiry without the official name. So endorsing impeachment was the only way that she could regain some control over this. And it's notable in that light that I think that in endorsing impeachment, Pelosi insists on it being limited to one issue, to focus solely on the Ukrainian business. And I want to make it clear that by calling it the Ukrainian business, I do not mean to minimize that in any way. In addition to being a remarkable abuse of power and a betrayal of the public trust, Tweety Pie was using his position as president to, and let's not forget taxpayer money, to pressure a foreign government to dig up some dirt on a potential political opponent for his own personal benefit. But in addition to that, the fact that it was tied to congressionally approved military aid for Ukraine, but remember, there was no quid pro quo. No, there was no explicit quid pro quo, as if there ever is. Do you really think that President Zelensky was not aware of the fact that this military aid had been mysteriously held up for some months? You really think that when he raised the prospect of some more missiles, and Tweety Pie answered with something, with saying that, okay, but you can do us a favor though, that Zelensky didn't get the meaning? The thing is, tying it to this aid marks what Trump did as at least some form of extortion. The conversation in that transcript, that partial transcript, but it plays out like someone with a bent nose doing their best Marlon Brando impression, saying something like, "Nice military aid package you got there. Shame if something happened to it. oh, by the way, in this other matter, you could do us a favor. I know that's a terrible Marlon Brando. Let it go. In fact, the call and what surrounded that call could involve 4 separate felonies: illegally soliciting campaign help from a foreign government, bribery, misappropriation, and conspiracy. But getting back to Pelosi, the fact remains that she is still unhappy with this. She still does not like the idea of impeachment. She still has the same concerns she did before. And limiting the inquiry to a single issue, particularly an easily understood one, is the best way to control that inquiry and get it over with so fast that the idea is it won't be an issue in the 2020 elections, or at least not nearly as big as it would otherwise have been. But the fact is, we must not let this be limited to a single incident, a single issue, a single case. There is so much more that should be addressed here. And if we ignore those other issues, we are saying that obstructing justice, ignoring the emoluments clause, and openly profiting from the office of president, breaking campaign finance laws, abusing the classification system for personal gain, undermining constitutional government, and corrupting the political process, colluding with a foreign government to influence a national election, ignoring subpoenas, refusing to obey laws even when the plain black letter of the law says otherwise, subverting the very rule of law by turning the Attorney General into his personal lawyer, subverting free speech by encouraging violence against protesters, subverting the free press with lies about fake news and claims that his Twitter feed are the only source of real truth, engaging in witness tampering and now witness intimidation, even refusing to recognize Congress as a co-equal branch of government. If we don't address those, we are saying that none of that is important enough to address. On the very first edition of the Erickson report back in May, I said then that we cannot not impeach. That even if we thought there was no chance in the Senate, we had to throw down a marker saying this is not acceptable. That remains true. And as significant as it remains true for more than just that phone call to President Zelensky. We cannot not impeach on more. Okay, switching to something maybe a little bit lighter. This is something we call Note It in Passing. It's about every time I try to have like 5 things that I'll spend only about like a minute or so on, but things that I thought should be mentioned, even if I can't spend a lot of time on them. First, there's a combination of bad and I guess not so bad news on net neutrality. On October 1st, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals largely upheld the FCC's repeal of net neutrality rules. It was a cause for celebration among AT&T, Comcast, and Verizon, and a hard blow for consumers, particularly because the main argument pushed by the corporations to eliminate the rule, which was that it stifled investment in broadband, has been shown to be a lie multiple times. But in this, the not-so-bad news is that there is a victory for our side as well. And by the way, I do mean our side as opposed to the Dark Lords. More than 85% of voters, including 82% of Republicans and 90% of Democrats, support net neutrality. So in light of that, it's good that we did get one victory out of this. The court ruled that the FCC could not, as it tried to do, but it could not block states from passing their own net neutrality laws, as 9 states have done since the FCC repealed the rules. Net neutrality could be restored and placed beyond the reach of the FCC if Congress passed the Save the Internet Act, which has already passed the House, but of course fish-faced McConnell in the Senate has refused to bring up to a vote. So what we're more likely to see is a rush by corporations to fast-track legislation to give the FCC the authority to block state-level net neutrality. Of course, at the same time, the chances of that bill passing in the House right now are pretty slim. So actually what's now is that on net neutrality, the fight is moving to the state level. All right, next up, just something quick, just an observation. According to the right wing, and what you're going to hear, these are all quotes. According to the right wing, Greta Thunberg is an annoying foreign communist propagandist who channeled Hitler in a hate-filled rant, instilling fear in millions of kids around the world who should be tased and arrested. And who, at the same time, she is also an obsessive, mentally troubled young girl and a victim of child abuse who was a creation of powerful Marxists, Soros-backed NGOs, Al Gore, and more, who is now being exploited by her parents and other adults. Just consider all this an illustration of the old adage, if you can't attack the message, you attack the messenger. All right, let's go to some good news, finally. On Tuesday, U.S. District Judge Steve Jones blocked Georgia's restrictive new abortion law from taking effect as it was supposed to on January 1st. The law bans abortions once a fetal heartbeat can be detected, which is usually, or can happen as early as 6 weeks before a lot of women even know they're pregnant. The law also declares that an embryo or a fetus is a natural person once cardiac activity can be detected, giving the fetus the same legal standing as an actual born child, which potentially makes any woman or any healthcare provider involved in abortion that is not state-approved liable for a charge of murder. This so-called heartbeat law is one of a wave of such laws passed recently by Republican-controlled state legislatures in a coordinated attack on Roe v. Wade. None of those bans has taken effect, however. Some have already been blocked. The rest are under challenge. All right, again, as of October 1st, the second anniversary of the Las Vegas massacre, some teachers in Florida can enter their classrooms carrying guns. In fact, Florida is one of 8 states that allow some teachers and coaches to carry guns to school. Some 36 of Florida's 67 school districts are participating in the so-called Guardian program, apparently operating under the notion that the more guns there are around, the safer everyone is. No matter how many times that notion is knocked down, it's like the zombie that rises again to walk the earth. And also believing apparently that security is found in a version of recreating the gunfight at the OK Corral. All right, last here for this time, a case to watch because of what its success, if it succeeds, will mean. Peter Vlaming was a teacher at West Point High School in West Point, Virginia. He had in one of his classes a female student who was transitioning to male. Vlaming refused to use male pronouns such as, him and his and so on, in referring to the student, and was accused of using female pronouns in discussing him with other people. When the school found out, Vlaming was told either use the male pronouns or risk losing your job. He refused and ultimately was fired for insubordination. Now he's suing the school and the school board for $1 million, accusing them of violating his religious conscience and requiring him to, in the words of the suit, quoting, take sides in an ongoing public debate regarding gender dysphoria and here comes the tell here, and use pronouns that express an objectively untrue ideological message. That is, being transgender is objectively untrue and an ideological message. And again, and is becoming a real trend, religion is being used as a weapon to justify bigotry. And I have to add that it's also true that at least in every case of which I'm aware, it is being used by conservative Christians. Let's take a break. And here we are back. And we are back with one of our regular features, one of the popular features around here. It's called 2 Weeks of Stupid, Clowns and Outrages. And we're going to start, as we usually do, with the clowns. And there we start with a return appearance by right-wing big brain Ben Shapiro. On his radio show a couple of weeks ago, he praised America's healthcare system by pointing to the country's life expectancy, which, according to the Centers for Disease Control, has actually been declining for the last 3 years in a row. But he described our life expectancy as pretty good when you take out all the confounding factors, such as auto accidents, murders, and suicide. By the way, note that gun deaths and suicide are considered public health issues. But the thing is, in other words, Shapiro is saying our life expectancy is great so long as you ignore a lot of the people who died. I swear, Ben Shapiro really is thought of as an intellectual in the right wing. All right, next up, we have George Murdock, a former pro wrestler going under the names Brodus Clay and later Tyrus, who now has a show under the name Tyrus on Fox. He talked about the climate strike, and he considered it not particularly important, not particularly notable, because, to quote him, if it's pre-planned, it's not really a protest. He didn't go on to explain what, in that case, it was instead. Next up, Charles Payne, a host at Fox Business. According to Payne, having to work multiple jobs in order to get by is not a problem. It's not a bad thing. It's an opportunity, something to be celebrated as part of the gig economy. You know, that economy where no one has a regular job, no one has benefits, no one has job security, that economy that we're supposed to be celebrating, that one, yeah. What a bozo. All right, here you go. There almost had to be an entry for Tweety Pie. Reports are that during the first week of October, Tweety Pie is planning to sign an executive order calling for further privatization of Medicare by expanding plans offered through Medicare Advantage. Now, he has not done this at the time I'm doing the show. He may have already done it by the time you see it. But anyway, the purpose of this executive order, supposedly, is to protect the government-run program of Medicare from socialist destruction of Medicare for all. Remember the classic case of the woman who at a town meeting during the debate over Obamacare had a sign reading, "Keep your government hands off my Medicare"? Apparently she's now working at the White House. All right, we're moving on then to our outrages. The first, last September, the National Labor Relations Board issued a ruling making it impossible for graduate students to unionize. How do they do this? By issuing a regulation, and I'm quoting it, establishing that students who perform any services for compensation, including but not limited to teaching or research at a private college or university in connection with their studies, are not employees under the National Labor Relations Act. The rule, if it gains final approval after a public comment period, will overturn an earlier rule that said, yeah, grad students, of course they're workers, of course they can unionize. The thing is, graduate student workers do most of the actual work of teaching undergraduates. They do the backgrounds, they do the research, they gather the materials, and they conduct a lot of the classes. They do the work. They get paid for it, not enough, but they do get paid. They have regular hours. They have a boss to who they report and who assigns their duties. But somehow, according to the government now, they are still not employees to the university who pays them. But they are instead, they don't seem to be able to explain. But in any event, in recent years, graduate student workers, along with another underpaid group, adjunct professors, have been very, very active in the labor movement, which may be why they were targeted here. And yeah, I do mean targeted, since the Labor Board didn't even wait for an actual case to come up before it in order to try to strip these workers of their rights. Yeah, it looks like they were targeted, yeah. All right, next. Earlier, I noted a case where a teacher was claiming that their religious belief, more honestly, their religious bigotry, freed them from having to follow the rules. In that case, their employer's requirement to use male pronouns to describe a student transitioning to male. Here's a more ominous application of the same idea. Joshua Payne Elliot is an educator who was fired in June from his job at Cathedral High School in Indianapolis. That's a Catholic high school in the Indianapolis Archdiocese. He was fired because he is married to Leighton Payne Elliot, and the Archbishop of Indianapolis, one Charles Thompson, demanded the school get rid of him because he regards all Catholic school teachers as ministers who are there for no matter what they believe or whether or not they're even Catholics, but they're all Catholic ministers who are therefore required to uphold church teachings, which obviously do not include same-sex marriage. Now, the school, Cathedral School, was supportive of Payne Elliot, but faced serious repercussions, including losing its nonprofit status, losing its diocesan priests, losing its ability to offer the Eucharist, which is a key Christian rite, if it resisted Thompson's demand. And in fact, Brebeuf Jesuit Preparatory School in Indianapolis was temporarily kicked out of the archdiocese for refusing to meet Thompson's demand that it fire Leighton Payne Elliot, who works there. The Vatican has suspended that ouster pending an appeal, but it shows that the threat from the Archbishop was very real. Now, Joshua worked as a social studies and world language teacher at Cathedral School for 13 years. And the school had offered to renew his teaching contract for another year. But in June, the school told him it was terminating his employment at the direction of the archdiocese. But right there, there is the crux of this matter. Joshua did not work for the archdiocese. He worked for the school. His contract was with Cathedral School, not with the archdiocese. So he sued, charging that the archdiocese had illegally interfered in his employment contract with Cathedral, which it seems pretty clear it did. Not clear, however, and here it comes to the important point, not clear to the U.S. Department of Justice, which has filed a statement of interest in the case defending the archdiocese on the grounds of, you guessed it, religious freedom, and calling for the suit to be dismissed. The brief argues that the First Amendment bars courts from interfering in how a religious group interprets and applies its teachings, even if apparently that application consists of bullying a school into firing what the brief itself calls an excellent teacher because that group, that is the Catholic Church, doesn't like who that person married. Again, according to the Justice Department, claiming a religious belief is supposed to override, that is, making such a claim is supposed to override all civil rights and civil rights laws, even if the religious group is illegally interfering in a business contract to which it is not a party. Vanita Gupta, who headed the DOJ's Civil Rights Division during the Obama administration, summed it up well on Twitter, writing that, quoting, "The administration is once again using religion as a shield against core anti-discrimination principles to protect LGBTQ people." It's truly an outrage. All right, saving the worst for last. In the summer of 2017, police in South Haven, Mississippi, were searching for a domestic violence suspect. They got the address wrong and went to a house on the other side of the street. Now, at that point they shot and killed an innocent man. His name is Ismael Lopez. He was 41 years old. According to various news reports I found, police first alleged that Lopez appeared at the front door with a handgun and then tried to run away. At another point, they claimed they saw a rifle poking out of the now only partly open door. They also said a dog ran out, which of course they immediately shot at, and then they fired through the door. They fired shots through the door, killing Lopez with a shot that hit him in the back of the head. Now, despite these changing details, in July 2018, a local grand jury, surprise, declined to indict the two officers involved in the fatal shooting, after which the prosecutor refused to release either the names of the cops involved or the investigative file, which lawyers for the family had to pry loose. But that's not why this is here. Cops getting away with killing brown and black people is old news. No, this one has an extra twist of the knife. About a year after the failure of the grand jury to issue an indictment, that is, this past summer is what we're talking about. This past summer, the family filed a $20 million wrongful death lawsuit against the city of South Haven, the chief of the South Haven police, and the officers involved. In responding to the suit, the city declared in open court that it is their policy that if you are an undocumented immigrant, which Lopez was, If you are an undocumented immigrant, if you have no, quote, legally recognized relationship, unquote, with the United States, you have no constitutional protections. You have no constitutional rights, not even the right to not be wrongly killed. Quoting attorney Catherine Kirby, arguing for the city in court, if he ever had Fourth Amendment or 14th Amendment civil rights protections, they were lost by his own conduct and misconduct. He may have been a person on American soil, but he was not one of we the people, and so, she said, lacked all protection under the Constitution. Marie Wells, an attorney representing Lopez's family, lambasted the city's argument as both chilling and insane, and said, "We're stunned that people actually put this in writing." It's hard to grasp, it really is hard to grasp just how totally demented, how totally vicious the city's position is. If accepted, it would turn essentially all police into a version of the Tonton Macoute, able to abuse and even kill any undocumented person with impunity. Happily, it's also total crapola. The Supreme Court has ruled on multiple occasions that people on U.S. soil are guaranteed certain basic rights no matter their immigration status. And the cases, in fact, that the city cites in this desperate attempt to defend the indefensible are grossly misapplied and actually do not even relate to the case at hand. But while that stupidity on the part of the police makes the attempt grounds for a clown award, their position is much too vile, much too appalling for that. Even the term outrage barely contains this. Okay, that's it for this week. We're going to wrap up here, cut it off there. Be more stuff to coming up in the next couple of weeks. Again, if you have any reactions to the show, please, by all means, email me, Whoviating, WHOVIATING, whoviating@AOL.com, or go to my website, Lotus Surviving a Dark Time. You can get the email address there. Okay, but for now, I'm going to say that you have the best couple of weeks you possibly can until we see you again. And as always, peace.